It's 11 o'clock. We just started the meeting. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Luke Connolly. I'm a senior planner with the City of Cupertino, and I've been managing the housing element for the last several months. This is the first meeting of the Community Engagement Strategic Advisory Committee. This will largely be a presentation by EMC Planning and their team, who's done several presentations before the City Council recently. Before getting into the meeting, I see we have the City Attorney, Chris Jensen, and the City Manager, Jim Troop, present, and I believe Chris wants to say something right now.
Yes, thank you, Luke. I just wanted to let everybody know that we have not agendized the election of a chair and vice chair. So that was an oversight on staff's part. To avoid any Brown Act issues, I am going to recommend that Councilmember Moore run the meeting for the sole reason that she was the one that called this to my attention. So she gets the honor or the burden of running the meeting as a result of that. And then I would recommend that the committee members vote on a chair and vice chair in their next meeting. So if there are no objections, I believe that's how we should proceed. Hearing none, I will turn it over to Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. I call this March 30th, 2022 special meeting of the CEP Strategic Advisory Committee to order. Luke Connolly, our senior planner, will be taking the role of secretary. Luke, will you please call the roll?
Okay, so the committee members, Councilmember Moore.
Here.
Councilmember Chow.
Here.
Planning Commission Chair Scharf.
Present.
And Housing Commission Chair Parris.
Here.
Okay, all committee members are present.
Okay, thank you, Luke. Okay, so our first item, we have approval of the minutes. We have no previous minutes to approve, and we have no postponements. We move on to oral communications. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the committee on any matter within the jurisdiction of the committee and not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. In most cases, state law will prohibit the commission from making any decisions with respect to a matter not on the agenda. Luke, do we have any members of the public with their hands raised for oral communications? Yes, I see 2 hands raised. First, we have Jennifer. So I'll need, thank you.
I can take care of that.
Okay, thank you. And will someone please, Luke, will you please monitor the 3-minute timer?
Yes, can you all hear me?
Yes, welcome, Jennifer.
I hear we're going back into City Council chambers next Tuesday, and we've had 2 years. I should be a Zoom expert. Yes, thank you. I'm glad that we're having this meeting. There have been a lot of things that I have never seen in my 20 years of hanging out at the City Council, and the housing element, I won't go into that because I know we're discussing it, has become a source of great frustration, consternation, and lots of, I'm just not even sure why we're going there. Anyway, I wanted to just make a comment. I have a lot of statistical background in my training, chemistry, programming, and have a degree in biochemistry and a lot of background in programming and statistical. I have other family members who have statistical backgrounds. I have looked at a lot of the things that are going on with the audit report of the HCD and the handling of the housing element. I'm going to keep this separate from what we're discussing today. But I have very, very grave concerns about the original numbers, which were brought up by the Plan Bay Area. They came up with some statistical numbers which ABAG adopted, I think, a year or 2 ago against some recommendations of some elected officials. I was concerned about it at the time. I think that adopting these numbers have gravely compromised HCD's ability. Okay, by ABAG and MTC authorizing the use of these statistical numbers, we don't know where they got these numbers from. It has compromised HCD's ability to be able to carry out a state mandated by law, which is the housing element. It's not HCD's fault. And I don't know if ABAG and MTC, they didn't consult anyone. They may not have known, they may not have had statistical backgrounds, but I think we need to go back and look at who actually calculated these numbers for Plan Bay area back in the beginning. I have strong reservations about what statistical methods they have used. These results are not reproducible. That is the first law of scientific endeavor, is you have to have reproducible results or you are propagating bad data. So that's just my comment. We need this current problem area that we're in right now. We're all fighting with each other, was probably produced by bad data initially by the Plan Bay area folks. It's not their fault, but you know, if you do not have statistical training, nobody else knows what's going on. We need to go back to the beginning of the sources, and that is my comment as a trained scientist, computer programmer, analyst, and I did actually teach statistics, tutored it for quite a long time. We're having bad data and we're propagating it. That is not a good scientific method. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next, we have Lisa Warren. Lisa?
There it is. Good morning. So first off, I should say I'm really glad it's happening, that there's a structure now that we're beginning to understand and having somewhat of a comfort level with being able to engage, which I have not found until now. I do have a question though, and that is, I received an email last week that I chose not to open because it didn't seem right. And sorry, Lee, but it came from you. Now I know you're real, and I did open the one you sent today, but I don't understand how. I mean, I know other people that did not open it because it didn't come from the city and it didn't come from EMC. It's just suddenly there's an individual person emailing me, and I didn't trust it. So we really need to get this all figured out and let people know, because from the email this morning from Lee indicated that there were people responding saying, am I on this stakeholders group? Am I not? You know, people weren't notified one way or the other. I know I was not, saying specifically to me, oh, for example, you were selected, council decided not to go that route. We're going to include everyone that applied, and we'll let you know something in the future. There's been no communication to the people that haven't been watching these meetings or the city council meetings or following it in any way other than putting in their application. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me since Lee got these questions. So hopefully this is the beginning of getting it all balled into something far more transparent, and I believe that's the goal of this, and I believe you will all try your best to do that, but we really need to start with the basics, I guess I'm saying. So again, back to the positive thing. Thank you very much for doing this, and I look forward to hearing what's going to be said. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Luke, and thank you, members of the public. I see no further hands raised for oral communications. So we are closing oral communications, moving on to public hearings. We have no old business. For new business, we have item 1. Subject is a report from staff and EMC planning group regarding the proposed community engagement and affirmatively furthering fair housing plans for the housing element update process. So Luke, do we have a staff report?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Moore. I just wanted to briefly, I'll be turning the presentation over to Andy Flower of EMC. But I just wanted to, again, for some people that may have come in after the outset, this is the first meeting of the Community Engagement Strategic Advisory Committee. The council had made a motion to form this 4-member committee on March 8th. This is the first meeting. The goal is going to be to try to schedule meetings on Wednesdays at 11. There is no set or determined number of meetings yet at this time. I can anticipate there will be one in April for which notices will be sent out. But again, the goal of the committee is to really focus on community engagement planning and affirmatively fair housing requirements as well. I know Andy has made numerous presentations to the Planning Commission and the City Council. Today, you'll get a chance to meet other members of EMC's planning team and focus specifically on the engagement and AFFH issues that this committee is focused on. And with that, I will be turning this over to Andy. And I'm sure there'll be questions along the way. I think in order for the presentation to be successful, it would be good if Andy could get through this and introduce the other team members, and then save questions for the conclusion of the presentation. So with that, I will turn it over to Andy.
Thank you, Luke. I will share my screen. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Thank you to the committee members. Thank you for all of the time that you're volunteering in order to make this a more robust and inclusive experience. We highly value your time and your commitment. Thank you very much. And also thank you to all of you who have arrived and are joining us today, either watching it live or as it is recorded. Particularly, we want to make sure that all of those of you who have applied to be part of the stakeholder group, that we appreciate that you're continuing to stay involved and engaged. And those who are new to this program and process. And with that, we'll begin our meeting. Let's see, seems to prefer this. So trying to advance my slide, and we tested it and it worked, and now it doesn't. I can do it this way, I think. There we go. Yes, so our purpose today is to introduce the committee and the team. And we'll also be putting on something that feels a little different than most public meetings. And it's a demonstration of collaboration for AFFH and equity focus. So we're going to take you on a little bit of a journey. It might feel a little uncomfortable. It's honestly a little uncomfortable for us too, because we're open to outcomes. So we want to be as engaged with the committee as possible. So as Luke mentioned, we'd rather not have interruptions along the way, but we do have very specific periods of time within this presentation where we're hoping to have some brief contributions from the committee in the dialogue and discussion and collaboration. So our agenda today, we're going to talk a little bit about roles and expectations. Then we'll move on to talking about allies and partners. Approach and timeline. We'll be eliciting committee feedback for those 3 specific questions that we included in our memo. And at the end, we're going to be welcoming public comments. So we want to come back to the letter of law. So affirmatively furthering fair housing. This is new legislation, also known as AB 686. And this is a requirement that the state has made for all housing element updates that we endeavor to take meaningful actions in addition to combating discrimination that overcome patterns of segregation and foster inclusive communities free from barriers that restrict access to opportunity based on protected characteristics. And today we'll be talking about AFFH and we'll be talking about outreach. And we just want to make it very clear that it's important to not conflate those two. So while outreach is an essential component of affirmatively furthering fair housing approach to the housing element update, AFFH approach is not a subset of outreach. So that just really means that we're going to be looking at the housing element update throughout the process through that lens of AFFH. Roles and expectations. So again, we want to welcome everybody to the table today. And if you're just starting, you're right on time. And as far as being engaged with this process, and if you've been engaged all the while, and maybe with former housing element updates, we absolutely welcome your knowledge and your advice and your experience. And we also want to make it very clear that this is this is brand new. It's really a paradigm shift what's happening with this housing element update. So we're being asked to do new things where we're not getting clear, specific guidance. So we're glad to be on this journey with you, and we look forward to what will come out of this. So we want to make sure as often as we can that we have a shared understanding of terminology and intention and purpose. So so this Strategic Advisory Committee that's meeting today has been formed to provide guidance on plans for public outreach and community engagement strategies for the housing element update. It didn't say this in the memo, but I want to say specifically inclusive of AFFH or equity focus. Our allies and partners. Let's now get a little clarity about the term equity. And I'm going to bring in a couple of folks on our team. We have Lee Robinson from Be Diversity, an equity educator extraordinaire. And we also have Kristen Masters from Nonviolent Communication. Lee, can you take it from here for a little bit?
Yeah, thank you so much, Andy. Hey, folks, super excited to be here with you all. Really grateful, as Andy said, for your time and energy towards this process and these conversations. And right now, I want to introduce and maybe even reintroduce to some of you all this concept of equity. And then my colleague is going to share the concept of nonviolent communication as an additional tool, we're having difficult conversations and working together. So as you all see on the slide here, we have two different pictures, right? We have a picture of three people. They're enjoying a ball game, right? They're watching the game, they're cheering, they're having a great time. Now, on the left side, we have equality. On the right side, we have equity. And we like to talk about it in this way to differentiate between the two. So on the equality side, everyone has the same box, right? Everybody's standing on the same size box, same number of boxes. On the far left there, you see the guy, he's watching the game, he's having a great time. He can see everything, he's engaged, he's involved. The person in the middle, not so much, they're kind of hanging over, but they're there, they're watching the game, right? The person on the last block in equality isn't seeing the game at all. They're not enjoying the game. They're not having an opportunity to engage with the game. They can't see what's happening, right? So on the right side where we have equity, and that's what we're talking about today, right? Equity. And with equity, we see that the boxes have been moved a little bit, right? The tallest person who was seeing the ball game just fine, he doesn't have any boxes, right? And he can still see the game. The person in the middle, they're also still on the same amount of boxes and they can still see the game and engage. Thirdly, the person who couldn't see the game before now has two of the three boxes and can now see the game, engage, be included, have that experience, okay? So when we're talking about equity, we're talking about the fact that everyone may have different needs, right? So it's a needs-based conversation. It's one that doesn't subscribe to one size fits all. Now, whenever I show this image, some people are like, wait a minute, Lee, but isn't equality a better fit? Isn't it fair for everyone to have the same amount? And that might make sense, but fairness isn't always the best fit, as we see here, right? If we're giving everyone the same amount, then there are some people who aren't going to be included. So lastly, as we're thinking about equity and we're thinking about this imagery, we're keeping in mind that people's needs and circumstances might be different, all right? We get to hear the voices that may not be heard in the past. We get to seek out those voices and we get to specifically try to address those concerns. And we also get to encourage people to navigate some of the barriers that might make it challenging, right? Some of these things we get to look at which make this conversation really challenging. So again, when I'm talking about equity, I'm talking about engagement. I'm talking about the opportunity to really make connections, ask questions through outreach, and hear some things and narratives that we may not have heard before. And I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Kristen, to talk about a little bit about nonviolent communication concepts.
Thank you, Lee. So I just want to acknowledge that there's a lot to the ideas of nonviolent communication. I'm just going to give you a couple of things that I think are applicable in the work that you're doing. The first one is an intersection of where NVC comes together with equity, and that is there's a difference between impact and intention. And I want to acknowledge that there's an impact from who you are that's speaking and from which box you're sitting on, from what your role and identity is that you're speaking from. So I want to encourage each of you to speak your intention with clarity, as much clarity as you can, to include in your questions and proposals the community needs that you're trying to serve or protect, to make that explicit. Essentially to say what your in order to is. I'm suggesting this in order to protect something or in order to meet this particular part of the community's need. Making that explicit helps all of you who are attempting to collaborate able to weave the goals and the values into the fabric that you're making for this housing element and all that will come from that. I also want to say that acknowledge that the work that you're doing is going to result in change, and change makes people nervous. So the anticipation of that change can elicit nervousness. So we want to listen for, have your ears tuned for what matters to each person who gives their input. Listen for what matters to them and what they do want behind whatever fears they're expressing. You're listening for what they care about and what they're trying to protect. And I also want to say that there's a difference between kind of the needs that are there and the strategies. And most conflict and the biggest difficulties arise when we're trying to meet the same needs. We have the same values, but we have really different ideas and about the strategy in order to get there. So there isn't one right way, and there's a tension to trying to expand our sense of what we're trying to do as an initiative together. In order to hear many ideas from differing perspectives, we want to put together the best possible housing element for your municipality and for your communities. So again, you're listening for what matters in order to reduce the defensiveness that you might have and that others might have in hearing you. And you can do that by saying, I'm suggesting this in order to address a particular part of the community or a particular concern. If you say you're in order to, people have more of a chance of being with you. That's all I'll say for now.
Andy, I think you're muted.
See that. Thank you. Thank you. My mute is in a different location. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lee and Kristen. Appreciate your introduction to these concepts. Very, very rich and robust language for us to consider. And I appreciate especially the in order to. And we can think about that also when we think about the kinds of groups that HCD is encouraging jurisdictions to consider outreaching to for these housing elements. And this is a short list of such groups: nonprofit and community-based organizations, housing providers, lower income and special needs community members and households, including representative organizations, churches and community groups serving ethnic or linguistic minorities, and local and regional advocates and service providers, such as homeless service agencies. So I mentioned HCD, and I want to be clear for those who are new to this. So that is the State Department of Housing and Community Development. They're the ones who came up with the numbers for the whole of the state. And they are the regulator, reviewer, also our guide, and potentially an enforcer. ABAG is another acronym that we'll be discussing throughout this process, and that stands for the Association of Bay Area Governments. There is a lot of money that's brought from the state to this Association of Bay Area Governments to offer technical assistance, expert advice, and data support. So you'll see that the source for much of the assistance that is sometimes either reviewing for what the HCD has provided as revision requests for instance, Southern California cities, which was part of our attachment for today's meeting. That's one way that they can provide advice and guidance. Another way that they can advise us is when HCD develops memos, sometimes they're very complex and sometimes they need a little more clarity, and ABAG helps to parse that out. For instance, with the rezone memo that was brought about from ABAG that was initially sourced by an understanding of the rules that HCD provided in their memo. The other agency we've included here is WVCS, and that's West Valley Community Services. This is a group that I think most people who have joined today are well aware of their regional leadership in providing services to the community of Santa Clara County. And we've also included as an attachment some ideas and ways in which they might be able to partner with us going forward. They have a unique ability to provide support to their clients who happen to also be the folks that we need more information from. And we want to make sure to not be extractive or exploitive as we go forward in providing scenarios where that kind of advice can be given in the most efficient way, because we want to make sure to be respectful of each individual's time, as well as community-based organizations' time. And they can help advise us with an understanding about their clients' needs, as well as data, for instance, with surveys that they are helping us to provide to their clients. And with that, I would like to open the floor a little bit here, and I'm going to stop the screen sharing for just 3 minutes at most for each of us. And I know our team is going to go a lot more quickly than that, but I do want to give the benefit with this as our introductory meeting for each of us to just declare our name, pronouns, and what strength we bring to our role. So I'll start with myself. My name is Andy Flower. I'm principal planner at EMC Planning Group, and I have a strong passion for bringing groups together to solve difficult, seemingly intractable, I don't want to call it a problem. I mean, we know that the housing crisis is a problem for many, but this is also an opportunity. And so I have real joy in coming to solution with groups of people who maybe didn't think that they would be able to work well together, but in the end can gather around something brand new. I'm going to pass it along to our other team members. Kristen or Lee, would you like to go next?
Sure, I'll go. My name is Kristen Masters. I do work with a lot of different organizations, but Nonviolent Communication Santa Cruz is one of those. I think of one of my strengths as helping us navigate difficult waters in ways that move toward the dream and the vision that we're trying to get to with the least amount of damage to one another as we can do. So it's really about helping people lean into trusting one another and building.
Thank you, Kristen. I'm Lee Robinson. I use they and them pronouns. I'm the equity educator working with EMC. And one of the major strengths, it's already been spoken by my two colleagues, but really the capacity to hold that space and bring people together to talk about some of these things that we're trying to do and to collaborate and meet their goals. And I've been told numerous times that I have a calming voice and personality that usually gets folks to feel welcome and to feel ripe for a conversation. So that's, I think that with my expertise and my passion and compassion, I think gives me a couple of additional strengths for this role. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. And Chair Moore, I recall hearing some strong words of hope at our last council meeting about what this group will be and where we may go with it. So we would love to hear an introduction from you. And if you could also name your other members and invite them to introduce themselves, we'd appreciate it.
Terrific. Okay, thank you, Andy. Well, I'm hoping that we work together as a strong team. We have a significant project ahead of us, and it sounds like some of the air quotes rules about the project are a little bit ambiguous at this point. So as we move forward, I'm hoping that ABAG provides that technical assistance that we need for some of these ambiguous areas, so that we are able to meet the metrics. So for strengths, I'm hoping it's my practical nature. We have a problem. We have a set of numbers, and we need to find places for those the 4,500 units to be distributed across the city. So that's what I have to offer. And next we have our Vice Mayor, Liang Chow.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm on my phone's hotspot right now. Wi-Fi doesn't work today at home. And I had another meeting back to back, so I couldn't run to the City Hall. And so I think the affirmatively fair, furthering fair housing is important. And I have spent quite a bit of time studying the requirement. I actually shared a really nice webinar with the city staff, but it's not included in the staff report. That webinar has good slides spelling out the 4 components they want they want this report to be structured, and out engagement plan. So maybe I can share that later. And I think this community is important. This is our chance to do our part to help with the housing crisis. And I understand that Wednesday 11 is not the best time, but this is not outreach meeting. This is a planning for the outreach. So we should have other outreach efforts from that we can spawn from this meeting. So I hope everyone can contribute to help us to reach out to more people and all the stakeholder group applicants. Thank you for your application. We really appreciate that. And we hope that we can all work together, can reach out to the many people who are usually ignored and who cannot participate in this kind of process. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And I think what was implied in what you just said was that you have really looked at the details of this process that we will be endeavoring towards. So next we have our Planning Commission Chair, Stephen Scharf.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, welcome.
Hi, I'm Stephen Scharf. I'm Chair of the Cupertino Planning Commission, and I'm also a former City Council member and former mayor. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And I think my strength is that I'm kind of a policy wonk, and I've always believed in what I like to say is data, not dogma. And I'm very glad that Southern California was brought up earlier, because I've been on the California Alliance of Local Electeds call for the past few weeks. And the hot topic is the cities in Southern California that have had their housing elements rejected by HCD because of AFFH. They've submitted elements that have number of units that meet all income levels, but they have not met the AFFH requirements. So I think we can learn a lot from what's transpired in SCAG. SCAG is Southern California Association of Governments. And I'm confident we can craft a compliant housing element that will meet HCD requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Planning Commission Chair Scharf. And next we have our Housing Commission Chair, Tessa Paris.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tessa Paris. My pronouns are she, her. And let's see, I'm first generation Hispanic from Mexico. I lived in Southern California, and I have volunteered extensively in lower income communities. I've been a realtor for 32 years, and during that time, I used to be able to put any income level in a owner buyers into a community based on whatever income they knew they could work hard and save money and buy a house eventually. And currently that's not the case. And so it is extremely hard. And during the crash, 1 out of 4 properties got bought out by investor companies, Rockwell and whatnot. And I am devastated because I see community members that have to drive 2 hours away to work here. And until we make and change the corporate ownerships and give them, not treat them like humans, I won't get into that, but I'm here because I'm passionate about housing. I've seen what corporate ownership has done. At the last Senate hearing, when they were discussing SB 9, one of the senators brought up that corporate ownership is only 17%, and they expected it to go up to 25, not much further from now. So that's a different topic, but I'm here because I'm hoping to make a difference in how we handle and makes it even more delicate process to meet the needs of the community that I can no longer sell a house to that I used to 20, 30 years ago. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Housing Commission Chair Parris. So Andy, I'm noticing we have a couple of hands raised from members of the public. Are we able to take a break at this point and have some comments on this first portion of your presentation?
Well, we do have some work that we're hoping that the committee can get through. So if they could wait until the end, I would appreciate that. I want to make sure that the committee has time to get the work complete today. And thank you.
Okay, let's move on. Thank you.
Great. We do have one more introduction, and this is Kylie Clark from WVCS, West Valley Community Services. And most of you are already aware of Kylie, but what we were realizing is maybe you've not actually been formally introduced to Kylie. So she's going to share with us a little bit about herself and the organization that she represents. Kylie, if you could, please.
Thank you, Andy. And yeah, thank you everyone for having me. I'm really happy to be here. So I'll just give a quick introduction of myself and a little more elaboration on what West Valley Community Services can bring to this process. So like Andy said, I'm Kylie Clark. I'm the Public Policy Coordinator at West Valley Community Services. And WVCS created this role to connect clients with policies. So we serve a lot of protected classes and underrepresented individuals, and it's really hard to access the spaces of council meetings and things happening at the level of the county. And there's obviously policies going through that impact our clients. And so what I'm working to do is to connect our clients to all of this and to engage in different actions with them and things like that. And that's really what West Valley is hoping to bring to this space, is to connect our clients with this process, because like Andy said, for AFFH requirements, it's going to be really important for people like our clients to be engaged in this process. And I think that West Valley will really be able to bring that, just because we already are serving and working with these individuals. And I've definitely been working with some people who I'm really excited to include in this process. And one thing that Andy and I have discussed that I think will really help toward AFFH and kind of make us stand out from other cities even is client leadership. And so, for example, if we do a focus group on disability, that will be led by one of our clients who is disabled and who has experience with all of that. And that's really different from having someone from not that experience leading that. And I think that that will make us stand out. And so I'm really excited for that. And something else I want to emphasize is that as I and West Valley do this, we really want to receive a lot of input and ideas from this committee. So if there's anyone y'all want to be connected with, like a specific group or anything like that, you can just reach out to us and we will do that for you. Or if you have ideas for types of outreach you want done, we're definitely there to support in that way as well. And so, yeah, we're really excited about continuing to build a relationship with Cupertino. And I think that this will be a really, really good way to work together. And I'm excited to collaborate and to help however I can.
Thank you, Kylie. I'll return to the presentation. And I want to invite Kristen to maybe help bring about these questions, and Lee to really help us understand and have a shared goal about what this process is going to be like.
Okay, thank you so much, Andy. So yes, we were thinking about the importance of, like, what is a valuable skill to have for this work that we're doing together. And again, we talked a little bit about the role of the advisory committee, right? Being formed to provide guidance on plans for public outreach and community engagement strategies, specifically inclusive of AFFH equity. So we thought it would be really important to really think about what it means to work together, right? Because we're going to be doing some work together. We're going to be, this committee is going to be working together. And what does it mean to really come together and do this work? So you all will see those 3 questions there around the collaboration process. And we wanted to encourage you all to jot these questions down, to write these questions down. Give you a few seconds to do that, to write these questions down, because we want you to be thinking about these questions as we're talking with you all about collaboration, okay? First question being, when you think about collaboration, what feelings come to mind and body? We want to make sure that we're including how we're feeling, you know, what's coming up for us mentally, what's coming up for us emotionally, and what's coming up in our bodies, right? What do you think, or what do you know that supports collaboration on a project like this? Right? What are some of the practices you know will support collaboration? And what do you know that you can bring towards that end? So again, an opportunity to think about your skills, your talents, and what you can bring. And then finally, what might need to be named or spoken about the hardships or challenges when thinking about collaboration within this process? Okay, so that third one is just making sure that we're also thinking about what are some of the challenges with collaboration, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about general collaboration, and then my colleague is going to talk a little bit more about collaboration specific to the work that we're doing, okay, the update. So just really quickly, what is collaboration? Collaboration has been defined as the action of working with someone or a group, et cetera, to produce or create something. Okay. And I want you all to also write down one more question I want you thinking about. Within this context, what does collaboration mean to you? What is one word that comes to mind for you when you think of the word collaboration? Okay. Also, the value of collaboration. What is the value of collaboration? It encourages problem solving, and overall problem solving becomes easier, right? Because we're relying on each other, we're relying on a group, right? It also encourages creativity, right? There's a lot of different voices in this space, a lot of different experiences. And if we're bringing all those voices and experiences into the room, then we're looking for these things. We're looking to be more inclusive, for example, okay? It also encourages knowledge and skill sharing. All right, we learn from each other. You all, I learn something, a couple of things new every single day. And I hope that that is the case, because once I stop learning, then there's something else going on, right? So I am open to learning. I am open to not knowing things and creating spaces where we don't know everything. We get to learn every single day, and we get to learn from each other. Okay. Again, the diverse experiences and backgrounds. And I think that collaboration also encourages trust and synergy with each other, right? To step into a space and share ideas and work together to create something. It's really valuable. And I think it's super valuable for this process and this work that we're trying to do. Okay. Now, collaboration can be difficult sometimes. There are some things that can block us from collaborating, right? When working together towards a goal. And some of those things may be that we're working with each other. We all may come from different places and different lived experiences, right? And how do we allow for those things to still be in the room as we're still working together to meet our goals and to meet each other's needs and to move forward in this larger piece. And then lastly, before I hand it over to my colleague, is I want to talk about sometimes we bring unchecked biases into the rooms with us, into spaces. And we call those implicit bias, right? Those are sometimes things that I like to say, you know, we all are born with a whiteboard, right? This board, there's nothing on it yet. And then things get written on that board about people, places, and things. And then they start to impact maybe how we carry ourselves and how we navigate spaces, right? So there's also going to be opportunities for us to maybe check some of those unchecked biases that might lead to microaggressions or that might lead to stereotyping, et cetera, right? And those are some of the harder conversations I was talking about earlier. But within the sense of collaboration, when we do those things and we have an opportunity to move through those spaces, it has the tendency to make our group even stronger as we're moving towards our goals. So I'm going to hand it over to Kristen, and she's going to talk a little bit more about this idea of collaboration within the housing element process.
So I want to follow up on a couple of the things that Lee said. You know, that implicit bias, we all have them. There's nobody that doesn't have implicit bias. And when you're trying to work on a collaboration that is as complex as this one is, we just always have to kind of have in place that we don't know what we don't know. You're looking through the lens that you're looking through. And so inviting that sense of like, oh, I want to know more about what this person is saying and not jump to conclusions about who they are, what they're thinking in a way that doesn't actually invite you to learn something, as Lee just said. So you want to reach across perspectives and have a sense of wanting to invite people to say, tell me more about what's important to you. What is your in order to? Because I'm guessing what it is, but I don't actually know. And I want to say that trying to do that while you're also trying to be efficient and move a process along is a challenge. It's holding a lot of different things. I do want to acknowledge that at best, you know, when we're trying to do trust building and collaboration, we have a lot of time, and you don't have as much time as you would like. But trying to do that while balancing some sense of being able to speak. What might be difficult about collaboration in this housing element, in this subcommittee, as you move towards equity? Can you keep pointing toward where we're going and reaching for kind of holding the best possible outcome and a sense of, I want to understand you. I want to understand what you're trying to express to me. So there's so much more to say about collaboration. All of you have been living it your whole lives. We all know that we have challenges in certain places. And so I guess it's an encouragement to notice when something gets hard and to see if you can reach for what is it that I can do in this moment that serves the work of this committee, not just my interest and not just the interest that I might be thinking about, but all of our interests. So that's enough for right there.
Thank you, Kristen and Lee. And that leads us into this discussion of approach and timeline. So in thinking about our timeline, we have the guidance that was made available with our attachment for today's meeting. And this information came from an analysis by ABAG looking at HCD's revision requests for SCAG communities, or Southern California area jurisdictions. And so we know that in moving forward with our AFFH approach, we need to make sure to include actions that are specific and time-bound with commitments, metrics, and milestones. We've definitely heard that through every piece of advice from HCD. We need to consider HCD's 5 fair housing categories for goals, policies, and actions. And I believe Vice Mayor Chow had mentioned that earlier today. And we'll absolutely be including that in with our templates. And we'll follow HCD's AFFH guidance closely, making sure to include each section and subsection in the outlined order. So we're beginning to definitely pick up all of those easy tasks, like making sure that our drafts are written in the same order, that the recommended checklists from HCD are spelled out, and moving forward, we are also incorporating all guidance that we're receiving from HCD in several formats, including webinars and memos and checklists. And through ABAG, who are able to offer us regionally specific guidance, we're getting assistance on several fronts, including ways in which we can integrate what has been made available to us in draft form with what's called AFH. And we're not going to get into the details too much about that, but the council will be seeing this document in, I think, early June, and it's something that the Lawyers Committee has provided and created to meet state requirements that are very similar to AFFH. So we have a lot of data to work with to begin with, but we do need to stretch it out and pull it around and analyze it in new ways to make sure that we're meeting the HCD requirements specifically for the housing element. So part of our initial approach that we see as necessary moving forward is to partner with WVCS, West Valley Community Services, partner with them for outreach. And they have been generous in providing us a bit of a scope, just draft for now, but it's something that we're not discussing in detail at today's meeting, but except to share with you this outline, this idea of hosting 3 focus groups, and separate from that, to also have faith community outreach. And that would be specific for a few reasons, one of them including a state law that enables housing to be built in the parking lots of churches. And again, we're not going to get into the weeds for that, but these are the kinds of ideas and approaches that we'll be making available with our refreshed website that will be coming through hopefully here in this month of April. We'll also we would like to work together with the WVCS to enable individual interviews and videos with not only clients, but also providers and those who represent the clients that we're looking to serve. And as Kylie mentioned earlier, the leadership potential that she is growing with among her clients, so that they are self-selecting and being recruited to grow their leadership. And this is an exciting thing that HCD would love to see, that we are able to leave a legacy with the work that we're doing, so that we take our information that we're gathering and we're also empowering those who are new to speaking up to have a positive experience and be supported through that positive experience, so that they would consider staying engaged and continuing to be a part of the public policy process. So as I mentioned earlier about feedback, we are working with WVCS with surveys, and we're just now starting to tally information from that, and we're going to be excited to share that with council in the near future. So here we're coming upon our sort of workshop portion of the meeting today. We're going to try to get our hands on this idea of collaboration, first starting out with talking about our schedule. And this was the early Milestone schedule that was brought to council, and we had high hopes of being in the throes of working drafts right now. Our initial attempt in working with site options, we realized it needed a little more time and review and effort. So that's where we're at now. And we can't begin with our CEQA process until we have a finalized list of site options. But all the while we are preparing data and analysis. So we are working towards those working drafts, but also recognizing today's meeting and where we're at with our outreach and choosing to not go forward with the stakeholders meeting. That's all just part of our process, because I think we're all here today with a belief and understanding that we will transform and evolve that initial idea and bring forward all of the best intentions of what that would have been into what we'll instead create together, collaborate, and bring forward AFFH concepts into the outreach process. So it's important for us to understand primary goals. We've heard that there's questions about what is the timeline, what is the revised timeline, because we have shared a couple of timelines along the way. But as I mentioned, we're improving our process along the way. We've seen that out of 197 jurisdictions in Southern California, only 2 were able to be certified on time, and on time includes that 120-day grace period following the deadline. So we also know that I think upwards to, I think close to 80% of the comments that were received by those jurisdictions who did not certify on time, though many, if most, if not all, had adopted housing element updates. In other words, it had been brought thoroughly through their review process and their councils had adopted it. Then in giving it to HCD did not then certify. So we want to avoid that as much as we can. We would prefer to provide Cupertino with the best possible draft, one that includes everybody's work today in getting us to a place where we can have something that is certifiable. So we're trying to learn as many lessons as we can and make this as thorough, as thoroughly thought out as possible. But of course, there is a timeline and there are consequences for potentially not being certified within that 120 days. I want to mention the biggest consequence of that is that we would then have a 1-year period of time in which to carry forward any of the rezoning that would be necessary to make up a shortfall of sites. We're sleuthing out the sites as in a very detailed way. So if we'll see how much rezoning may or may not be necessary going forward. We're considering every site possible, and property owners are also able to self-select and let us know that if they're interested in their sites being considered. So we want to encourage that on our website. We have a property owner interest form for anyone listening in the audience today. So getting back to this concept of collaboration, we would like to hear from our committee members today. So we have a full 20 minutes.
Excuse me, Chair. Could I ask Chair, through the Chair?
Vice Mayor, Andy is still facilitating the meeting, and it looks like we're moving on to a place where we're going.
I just wondering, the timeline chart doesn't really have calendar time.
We'll correct. We'll get to that. Thank you.
Okay.
Andy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. So yes, we would like to get to the place where we are all certain about the calendar time. As I mentioned, we've provided 2 different draft timelines, and if we're not all together on the goals, then there could be 10 other timelines that I might make available. But if we can be certain about the goals, it's going to help us to be a lot more confident about the actual dates. So if through the chair, if we may open discussion with the committee members today, on this topic, and we'll attempt some collaboration here, and with no more than 5 minutes total, and those 5 minutes can be dispersed throughout the discussion.
Okay, Andy, for some clarification, could you explain this, what you're looking for here with regards to collaboration beyond the basic primary goal of we want to have a certified housing element. So what are you looking for beyond that, the more nuanced comments?
Thank you for that clarification. Yes, so beyond that, I think it would be helpful to understand if what motivations people are bringing to the table. For instance, I think I have heard in other jurisdictions that there may be a real push to make that deadline to be within the 120 days. And if we have committee members today who have that as a high in their top 3 goals, that's something that we need to be able to discuss thoroughly together so that we can understand what would be necessary in order to make that goal come true, or what the trade-offs or might be in order to meet that goal.
Okay, thank you, Andy. So we did have the Vice Mayor had some comments about the timeline, so perhaps that's one of the Vice Mayor's primary goals. And let's see if we have some hands raised from members of the committee. Okay, scrolling up. Okay, Vice Mayor, your hand's raised.
So I am confused. I think this committee is supposed to work on community engagement, and now you are asking the committee to provide input so you can decide on the timeline for housing element. That doesn't seem to be within the scope of the committee. So I'm confused on that. And then, so we are trying to identify goals in order to determine the timeline. So what are the options in terms of timeline? So, and also, is that even within the scope of this committee? And in regard to the earlier presentation about the collaboration, I think we really, in order to have a good collaboration, we need trust. In order to have a trust among the members, we need transparency. We need clear minutes. If there is any meeting, we need minutes. If there are any recommendation, we need a clear rationale on why those recommendations are being provided. For example, a very simple example, that we have 5 languages translated for the housing element page. However, I have asked why these 5 languages were chosen, what data support that selection. I never got an answer. So that erodes my trust in the process. So it would be great going forward that, and also as for the AFFH, from my reading, the very essential thing HCD says is extremely important for this to be customized for the individual jurisdiction. Therefore, we need assessment of our current housing gap, if there's any segregation. That data is important, and without that assessment, it will be hard to define our outreach method. So I wonder when that kind of assessment will be available. So we might have some initial outreach plan, but then we might need to adjust that so that we can reach the people who the assessment might identify as gap. And then another issue is HCD webinar also said that we need to reach out to population in all income levels, capitalize all. And I think West Valley Community Service is certainly an essential partner in this process to reach out to a lot of low-income population. However, that cannot be the only partner because we have a lot of middle-income population, people who actually are struggling, the school employees, those population, how do we reach out to them? We need to reach out to all income levels. And I thought that's the goal of this committee, is to community engagement. So I'm a little confused with this timeline collaboration called. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Mayor. And Andy, did you want to address the Vice Mayor's concerns at this point, or did you want to save that to the end?
I can do it right now, just so that way it's specific to each member, as far as data that or feedback that might be useful or understood as transparent.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. There was the question about the 5 languages. The 5 languages were recommended to us by the Equity Advisory Group, which was a subcommittee of the Santa Clara Collaborative, which was funded by ABAG REAP funds. So they are, as I mentioned earlier, they are our technical advisors. They are understood to be the guides that HCD would like us to look to for information on how to proceed. So, so we followed their list with those languages. That's why we have that available.
Could I get that in writing?
Sure.
Where did their recommendation come from? Did they look at Cupertino specific data to arrive to that recommendation?
Yes, they did look to Cupertino. We received an email that was specific to Cupertino, and we can make that email available. I heard something about meeting notes. I don't think you're talking about today's meeting notes. I think because I think it was discussed earlier about our regular meetings with WVCS. We're happy to provide our meeting notes, but with summaries of those. Either way, those meetings did not only involve discussion of Cupertino, but also Montserrano and Los Gatos, particularly for putting together surveys that will be meaningful going forward. Let's see, there was also a question about all income levels, and that's an example of what might help lead us to our primary goals here. So with your permission, I could add that as notes to consider for these primary goals. And we can just talk, excuse me, generally about what these goals are as an outcome of these discussions right now. So the reason why it's important is because we are slowing down the process. We did not move forward with the stakeholder groups as we had initially proposed. And as I mentioned, that's only going to serve this process well in helping to meet HCD requirements. I think we all have faith that that's the case. We have great minds all working together today and throughout this process. So understanding what goals this committee has for these outreach groups will help us formulate what the timeline will be in relationship to it. So there was a question about an overall timeline. If we don't have a handle on what our timeline is for this part of the outreach, then it's difficult for us to be able to factor that in with the bigger picture.
Okay, so if that's the input you need, it's timeline for this committee to produce a result. I actually recommended to the staff, if necessary, we can have weekly meetings or even 2 meetings a week so that we can get this done faster. If that's possible to be supported by staff. Yeah, I think we want to be sure that we finish this. We can finish our draft as soon as possible. And the AFFH, as I understand, is in parallel to housing element, and they are related but really not dependent on each other. For example, your climate action, the EIR report will, I mean, they can be in parallel. And I think this committee can do our best to meet the existing timeline of the housing element. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair. So there were two things in there that I wanted to point out. So it sounds like the Vice Mayor does want us to meet the timeline requirement. I'm hearing that. And there was also a request for an assessment to be made available. We do, in our current housing element, have a technical document in the appendices, which is essentially a current status of the city for back in 2014. And I believe that would need to be updated for our current housing element process. So I think that if it isn't already underway, that should be underway, because it's simply a collection of current data, how the city is presently. So Andy, is my understanding that assessment is already being worked on at this point?
Yes, we have a draft in with staff and have for a little while. But it is important to make clear that the minimum requirements and what ABAG is assisting and guiding us to produce is maybe a little different than exactly what has been produced in the past. So I do want to sort of set expectations for that if you're looking for a 1-for-1, well, gosh, we had this sentence in there, or that exact data point in our prior one, and why isn't it in this one? It's because we've received guidance that some aspects of that data may not be as relevant with this next cycle, and we want to be able to focus on those things that will get us through to certification and prioritize our time in that way. And speaking of time prioritization, if I may maybe ask all of the committee members to keep this concept in mind. And I'm realizing maybe this approach is it would be better for us to go ahead and move on to each of these questions that we have with the committee members, and that that we can derive those goals out of their responses. We have 3 requests to the committee that were each included within the memo, and I thought we would do a round robin with each request, and just really trying to keep it to a minimum of time for each of the committee members to respond, so that we can be sure to have time for public comments.
Okay, I respectfully, Andy, I would like to go back to the previous slide and let the committee members, if you can very quickly, please go through what your primary goals are. Mine, very simply, is to meet the certification process on time. If it is the 120 days, that's it. And Planning Commission Chair Scharf.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chair Moore. And I do agree that our primary goal is to meet the timeline of HCD. We don't want to get in trouble. We don't want to be fined. And that's the primary goal. I also agree with the Vice Mayor, is that we really need an assessment. We're a very different city than, say, San Jose or San Francisco in terms of how our population, our demographics, and how we're, the different parts of the city, we don't have that same kind of distinguishing population in each part of the city that, say, Los Angeles or San Francisco or even San Jose has. So we really need that assessment, so we know what our goal, so we know what to do. And I do agree. Well, I think Andy is getting into it, but I do agree that having someone from one of the few Southern California cities that has an approved housing element, I think that is probably the most important thing we can look at. And the other goal, hopefully, to keep these meetings shorter, we can get some of the stakeholders here to submit their advice in writing or in videos. So it doesn't all have to be presented at every meeting, and make that all public. Since this is a Brown Act committee. I agree with the Vice Mayor that if we have to have meetings more often than once a week, then let's do it. We are very short of time here. We are late. We're still waiting for the evaluation of all the 400 plus sites, and we really need to get moving. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Planning Commission Chair Scharf, and finally, Housing Commission Chair Parris.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I completely want to agree with the Vice Mayor and what Planning Commissioner said as well. But my goals are, number one, assess basically, and by the way, I do appreciate, Andy, the fact that we have the goals set, because if we don't agree on the goals and how we're going to go about them, we'll just go into different directions. So goals and how we're going to do that would also be a good thing. So I would like the assessment, of course, of where our concentration are of the lower income or the different demographics, so things that we're supposed to identify. That first assessment would be great, usually in the east, west, and be able to tell it. And then I would like as a second goal to identify the different vehicles and opportunities for which to accurately survey them. So each one will have different, is it the laundromat? Is it the schools? Is it the churches? Really look at how we're going to identify or use those vehicles. Number three, analyze the challenges, like what do we need to do to get them in the different locations so that we're not forced to do the high density. There's plenty of space to distribute it, since it's supposed to be equally distributed everywhere. We should be able to accomplish that if we have the right information. So after we have that, I'd like the third one that was analyze the challenges, and then develop a strategy to use the resources, locations, and zoning to accomplish that. Like actually identify, get us all through to the end result, which hopefully will mean we have a submission that's approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Housing Commission Chair Parris. You were under 2 minutes, and so was Chair Scharf. I do want to echo Ms. Parrish's comments that we need equitable dispersal of the housing element sites throughout the city. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Andy. And
can I make a request quickly?
Vice Mayor?
So I think we need 2 assessment reports. One is the current housing element policy assessment, and it's good to know that a draft is ready. I would really like to know when this draft will be made available for the commissioners and the council. And then we also need a fair housing assessment. That report, when will that be ready? Because when we talk about timeline, we need to know when that report assessment will be ready.
All right, thank you. And we'll move on to Andy.
Thank you, Chair Moore. So we have 3 requests that were included with the memo, and we would love to do another round robin here for each of the 3 questions, if we may. So our first question, would the committee wish to have a rotation of authoritative guests join the meeting? We heard from committee member Scharf that having someone from a Southern California jurisdiction would be advantageous. We could also invite an HCD representative, an ABAG collaborative representative, and any other representative that might be of interest to the committee members.
Okay, thank you, Andy. So I'm setting my timer for 1 minute. Each member of this committee, you have 1 minute to answer. If it's yes to all of those items, please just indicate that and move on without too much elaboration. Thank you. I begin with the Vice Mayor.
Okay, I think it's more helpful if written or any recorded webinar is available before the meeting, rather than having invited guests, because we really need a lot more time for interaction, collaborate in our meeting. So I'm not sure inviting a guest, unless they can provide something that's not already provided in other documents or webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we move on to Chair Scharf.
Yeah, I would favor having somebody like a planner from a Southern California jurisdiction that has an approved housing element. Thank you.
Thank you. And Housing Commission Chair Parris.
Yes, I agree with planner, housing commission, planning commissioner Scharf, that as needed, videos would be great, but I would like only as needed to have people that we can ask from, questions to back and forth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I agree with the other members of the committee. I personally would like to hear from all of these suggested groups, but in the interest of time, I would prefer to have someone who has a adopted housing element that was approved by HCD speak. Okay, and I'm going to send it back to Andy.
Thank you. And I want to be clear, they may be in.
Vice Mayor?
Sorry, Chair. If we're inviting someone, I think it's more essential to invite someone from HCD who would actually review the element, because they emphasize every city is different. One planner from another city with certified element doesn't mean we do the same thing, we will get certified. So I think it's essential. We talked to Paul, I think, Paul Doggo, the HCD person who will be evaluating, especially for high resource city. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's a great point, Vice Mayor. And Andy, I concur with the Vice Mayor's request. Having somebody who's actually doing the evaluation is a great idea. I'll send it back to you. And just in the interest of time, did we have a hard stop for this meeting?
We do.
And it is?
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. Okay, so at this point, we have not had any members of the public speak. Are we getting to a break point where we get to have public comment? We are.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We have
All
these 3 committee requests, and then we'll be opening it up to the public. I do want to be clear with the idea of a SCAG member who maybe has been certified. They may be in great demand. We will put out that request, but I can't promise that that they'll have the time to join. Thank you for everybody's comments. So request number 2, are there individuals, groups, or representatives that the committee would like to ensure are considered for inclusion with the focus group?
Okay, thank you. And we're going to start with the Vice Mayor. 1 minute on the clock.
Oh, is my hand raised still? Yeah, like I said, I think we need to include all income levels. Current workers of Cupertino, especially the public agency employees, school district employees, and I think it's special need, especially mentally developmentally disabled group, because Cupertino is known for our excellent autism program. Many families moved here for that, and now their kids are grown. So that's a very unique population we should serve.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. You still have 15 seconds left at the end. If you have some more, if you come up with another idea, please add it on. Okay, and next we have Planning Commission Chair Scharf.
Thank you. So I agree with representatives from the developmentally disabled community. Those are very important. Also, if we could get representatives from ethnic groups that are a very small minority in Cupertino. We have a big Asian population, Indian population, and Caucasian population, but we have a very small Hispanic population and African-American population. I would love to get representatives from those communities to speak and, figure out why, Cupertino is not someplace where they've considered to live. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we move on to Housing Commission Chair Parrish.
Thank you. I agree with all the previous comments and suggestions. I would like to add that we do community centers surrounding Cupertino, say West San Jose, Starbird, the area I helped in, and other community centers that service the lower income members of that community surrounding Cupertino, as well as churches. But I would like to suggest that we do at least one in person, because while emails or letters or cards go out, they may not understand the importance and how they benefit. For example, with the churches that you mentioned, that they could build something. Those churches, the one in specific, I'm thinking it would not possibly know that or be involved, yet they're very active in the community center. They do a lot of active help groups in the community. So I think at least one visit would be possible. And, if that's something we could do or get volunteers from the city, I think that would be well time spent. Thank you.
Thank you. So I agree with the previous committee members. I don't know that I heard senior groups, but we have seniors who, we have very wealthy seniors, and we have seniors who need the BMR senior units as well. I think that would be really important for our outreach, especially since we are an aging community. And I think with that, Vice Mayor, you still have a few more seconds there. Did you have another idea?
Yeah, so
Okay.
the HCD webinar suggested that we hold meetings at different times and different geological locations, and also provide transportation for people who might need it. And yes, seniors, a lot of seniors are not really used to virtual meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. And I'm going to bring it back to Andy, and we'll move on to the next question, I believe.
Thank you, Chair Moore. Yes, this is request to committee number 3. Are there additional topics that you would like staff to consider with next steps for this update process? If the committee provides a list during this meeting, staff will take all ideas into consideration and provide a detailed timeline at the next meeting. This is a little bit more of an open, but if we could still keep it to 1 minute to make sure we have as much time as possible for the public. And there could also be a follow-on in writing if that's easier.
Okay, thank you, Andy. My question would then be for our city attorney. If we were to write on follow-on items, how can the public become aware of what we have added? Because this is like a food for thought question to me.
So, so that's a good question. We could certainly post anything with the agenda materials for the next meeting.
Okay, good enough. So we're going to start now with the Vice Mayor, and we have 1 minute each. Vice Mayor?
Oh, can I do it later?
Absolutely. Okay, so Planning Commission Chair Scharf.
I was going to say the same thing. I appreciate our city attorney, Chris Jensen, because I probably have a lot of topics, but I can't just list them off the top of my head right now. So I would prefer to submit them in writing to Andy and have them put on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. And Housing Commission Chair Parrish.
I only had the only other thought I had was surrounding the survey process. I think I heard Andy mention that Montessorino, Los Gatos, and Saratoga had similar surveys. I wondered what those were about, and if we could really consider the surveys that Cupertino would have a very specific need and demographics and all that we really look at the survey process more intently. That's all.
Okay, thank you. And Vice Mayor?
Okay, yeah. So additional topics, I am looking into some middle income housing recommendations from, I think in ABAC, they formed a group, they have a report. I think that's probably a population we can actually serve in Cupertino with the very extremely high land price we have here. For the lower income, we actually are reliant on state and federal funding on that. There's just so much we can do, but we can do more serving the middle income population. So if what options are there, that would be good to know. And yeah, and I'm really eager to read the assessment report so that we can know what additional topic we should explore. And I hope that next time this presentation could be post questions before the meeting. Maybe that would be more effective. Thank you.
Good idea. And I see Planning Commission Chair Scharf, your hand's raised.
Right. So I did think of something during this time. I would like a topic added regarding our schools. So yesterday, I know the Mayor Paul and Councilmember Moore and myself met with the high school district. And I think it's very important as we select our sites to keep school impact in mind, both the schools. We have 3 high schools in Cupertino and many elementary and middle schools, and we need to think about enrollment as we consider the sites and AFFH. So hopefully that can be added. Thank you.
Okay, great point. And Housing Commission Chair Parris.
Yes, I wanted to, Vice Mayor reminded me of the segment of the population that is the middle class, as well as the lower class, because one of the challenges is the school bringing in new buyers or new members to our schools. And the challenges are they are having a hard time buying a house. Even high paying engineers are having a hard time paying. So really surveying, maybe perhaps providing a survey for that population, and then the middle class, that might be a totally different survey. And that kind of just triggered that thought. Because I mean, I 2 engineers, they couldn't live in Cupertino, but not because it was just what challenges are they having and how can we service them? That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Planning Commission Chair Scharf, your hand's raised again.
Oh yeah, sorry. So I was thinking back to one of the first slides in this meeting where it showed the 3 people standing on the crates trying to watch the baseball game from the outside. And my first thought was, they shouldn't be watching from the outside. They should be included in the stands. And so I think inclusion, how we include people and not have them looking from the outside into Cupertino and wishing, that they could take advantage of, the things that our city provides. So some way to generate more inclusion and not just have people wishing they could be here.
Okay, thank you. So I would just like to add that I would like some data, which it's hard to come by, regarding where our largest employers' employees are living, and where they are being drawn from. So I haven't seen that data since an EIR back in 2011. So I would like to hear some more about that. We've got 3 largest employers in the city. And with that, Andy, we have another question for the committee, or do we?
That's actually the end. I do want to draw the committee's attention to the memo where I did list these questions. And I bring this up only because I want to check in and make sure that is a place where you can know to rely on questions like this. One of my mottos as a planner is no surprises. As often as I can assuage any anxiety, I do
Chair?
so.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, one more comment. I realize these additional topics are potential policies we can consider. So, yeah, ownership housing, I think, is important.
Okay, you're cutting out, but I hear the ownership issue, and it sounds like more of the assessment type of question that you want the assessment to include what our current ownership makeup
people
is.
to be able to would improve the equity.
Right.
But also policies to improve, like first-time home buyer policies. I think the Habitat for Humanity has a program to help rehabilitate homes for lower-income homeowners, or a community land trust program so those kinds of programs could be considered, that might be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I see two more committee members' hands are raised.
I'm just saying, please get to public comment. You know, we've talked too much.
Thank you, Chair Scharf. And Chair Parrish?
Yeah, sorry, quickly, this was on my other notes, is proposing one of the topics was proposing a policy that would somehow not hinder, but limit the corporate ownership in Cupertino so that we can have more inclusive community that is not just, and if we can analyze what percentage of Cupertino's ownership is corporate owned. Thank you.
That's a very interesting question, and also the vacancy rate that we have here would be of interest for a lot of people for forming policy in the future. Okay, Andy.
Oh, thank you, Committee Member Moore and Chair Moore. We're ready to open it to public comment.
Thank you for everyone for bearing with the timers and getting through the questions. I think we did a great job. We're going to move on to members of the public for public comment. And I see there are 5 hands raised. I'm going to ask for an opinion. Ordinarily, we go for 3 minutes for each person. I'm thinking we need to 2 minutes, 1 minute. Andy?
Yes, I think 1 to 2 minutes. Maybe if it were 1 minute, allow the possibility for people to make a second comment if they are not satisfied, if time allows.
Okay, so I've got my timer set for 1 minute. We'll need things to be pretty brief. And thank you to the members of the public who have joined us here today. And we begin with Jennifer. Jennifer, welcome. You have 1 minute.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hi. Yes, I put my hand up over an hour ago. So I will talk fast. I have 6 items. I'm going to start out. I'm a 6th generation Californian. I was taught beginning Spanish by my mother as a toddler. And I took 6 years in high school and junior high and 6th grade. Even though my grandmother spoke Swedish as a child, she was born in California. I am very, very concerned about some of the transparency issues already with what's going on with this committee. The public has not been able to speak. 1 minute, I'll talk fast. Why is West Valley Community Services involved in this? Nobody has picked them yet. I respect what they do, but I really feel like they're just being a shoe-in when nobody else has had a chance to say anything. I have nothing against West Valley Community Services, but this is not the way to go. We need to have a decision. Are these meetings going to be in person? Because I intend to be there. I will let you know right now, I have a family member in West San Jose who was given a notice by the city of San Jose that 75 units of property around her are being rezoned by city of San Jose for some reason. We do not know why. I have had nobody from San Jose tell us why.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, and I was not made host, so I cannot mute or unmute when the time is up. So next we move on to Brooke. Welcome, Brooke.
Yes, thanks for letting me speak. A couple of points. Jennifer mentioned the need for data and good numbers. I'm curious to know if we've done a housing audit to determine what we have, because where we go from here is going to be dependent on what we have now. We don't know how many single families, how many commercial spaces, et cetera. So I think we might need to do a housing audit. Chairman of the Housing Commission mentioned about how housing has become so unaffordable. I really think that housing is a human right, and we have to do this on the national level, not on the local level. These are just stopgap measures because housing is a human right. It shouldn't be an investment strategy for a hedge fund. And then finally, Lee mentioned something about equity. And what I've noticed with some of these plans that have come before the city is it seems like the BMR units are sort of segregated. Being poor should not be an additional burden other than being poor. I mean, it seems like people are being stigmatized and they're being stuck down in garages or often separate buildings. And I just find that totally offensive. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. Next hand raised is, we've already seen, I'm seeing Jennifer. Is this a different Jennifer?
I don't see a different last name, or there's no last name. It still says Jennifer.
Okay, I'm going to move on to, is it Kalisha?
Thank you. And yes, it's Kalisha Webster, Senior Housing Advocate at Housing Choices. We are a nonprofit funded by the San Andreas Regional Center to help people with developmental disabilities to find and retain affordable housing. I just wanted to thank the committee members for agreeing that developmental disabilities need to be considered in the housing plans of Cupertino. We did submit some comments back in January to city staff and to the consultant. I don't think there's been any follow-up since then, but we're definitely very interested in being part of those focus groups in the future.
Okay, thank you, Kalisha. Very brief. Next, we move on to Govind. Welcome, Govind.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to emphasize that, it's very important, just like equity, that we also have distribution across the city. And it should also be based on equity, like, it's not the way BMR types need to be distributed across the city. And then, the housing audit and survey should be used to collect both, in terms of what is available and what is required, because the kind of BMR types that are required, that information is not very apparent. Different people have different kinds of requirements. And very importantly, one of the important things that we tend to ignore is that there needs to be a transportation solution for every segment of the population. So the transportation hubs need to be distributed. Putting the transportation hubs all across just on Stevens Creek doesn't make sense. When you identify certain centers, we have to have a method by which public transportation can be provided. And in general, it is important that we are every population is able to avail city services. So there is a need for city services and county services, especially transportation and other kinds of solutions to be made available.
Thank you, Govind. Your time is up. Thank you. Okay. And next we move on to Lisa Warren. Lisa?
Okay, thank you. So I want to strongly suggest, and I'm disappointed that it hasn't been done yet, is a housing audit. I don't know if this housing assessment is the same thing. What we need is where our homes are, what kinds of homes are, the status of the occupancy, et cetera, et cetera. We need that, and we'll need it ongoing. So if it can be done in a fashion that it can be updated annually, we're going to need this forever based on what the state is doing. So please do that. And while I understand that AFFH is critical for the success of this process, in order to have true equity related to participation, we need to promote a solid variety of population to engage. I currently feel that the AFFH guidelines are such a focus that several voices will not be heard. They'll just be missed. we should be trying to view the whole forest, not just limit it to some smaller groves. It's super important. And it's in the language for what we're supposed to be doing from HCD, but when it gets muddled with AFFH, I fear that there's going to be some trees that get caught in a wildfire and don't get.
Great, thank you, Lisa. And next we have John Zhao. Welcome, John.
Hello, committee. Thanks everyone for having me here. So my name is John Zhao. I am a Cupertino resident. I grew up here, went to public schools here. I'm a young adult, fortunate enough to live at home. I also work with high school youth in the South Bay at a nonprofit. So I have a few points to make. One is around engagement. I definitely support West Valley Community Services idea of empowering clients and people from underrepresented groups. Just thinking about like the IAP2 spectrum of engagement. How can we, move people further along the spectrum so that they're actually genuinely being like leading the process rather than just being tokenized. And also the 1 to 2 minute comment period is really not enough time for us to get our points across. So I really hope there are more opportunities for us to participate in these meetings. And then along the same lines, I think in terms of time management with these meetings, I would request committee members not to interrupt people when they're speaking and to stay on topic and follow the consultant's agenda and their facilitation. Just trust these people who are trained to run these meetings, and I think we will be fine. And then other groups to include, I think, should be young people. We have opinions that matter, and we are wise enough to understand. Outreach to high school.
Thank you, John. Your time is up.
Southeast Asia.
Okay. And last we have Neil Park Mcclintock. Neil, welcome.
Hi, thank you, council member. I think what John was going to say, I'm not 100% sure, is that when we talk about the Asian American community, we need to disaggregate. And that's really important because in Cupertino, you have very few Southeast Asians, but you have many East and South Asians. And so it's critical that we disaggregate those demographics. But in addition to that as well, I do want to point out the fact that when this group is doing outreach and when we're doing our AFFH analysis, it has to be regional. And so it can't just be segregation within Cupertino. I'm going to read directly from HCD. The analysis must be conducted at a regional and local level where the incidence of concentrated areas of poverty is discussed relative to the region and within the locality. And so that means we have to talk about the fact that, like, if we have a very small Latino population, why that is, and we know why. It's because it's too expensive. And so we need to be comparing our demographics to similar cities across the region too. And so that's a key component of this. Additionally, if we're so focused on time, I do wish that we had kept the stakeholder group because there are a lot of really valuable voices on the stakeholder group. And I think it would have actually expedited the process as well. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Neil. Okay, and I'm not seeing any further hands raised. So I would
Chair Moore, if I may,
Yeah.
we did get a written communication at 12:37. I believe that was around the time that the public comment was open. If you wish me to read that, I could do that.
Thank you. And can you keep it a minute or less? Or
You can
hit the
time me
hot-
and tell me when to stop. I'll do that.
I will do that. Thank you so much. All right.
To the strategic, this is from Joseph Fruin, to the Strategic Advisory Committee. As you know, the city's 6th cycle housing element must address the affirmatively furthering fair housing AFFH standards embodied in AB 686 and as further laid out in the California Department of Housing and Community Development's affirmatively furthering fair housing guidance for all public entities and for housing elements, updated April 2021, the guidance memo. The conduct of a sufficiently rigorous regional analysis is key to fulfilling AFFH standards. In particular, I draw your attention to pages 11, 32, 33, and 48 of the guidance memo, which speak to the character of the analysis and the approach to be followed. The analysis must include each of the fair housing issue areas, segregation and integration, racially and ethnically concentrated areas of poverty, access to opportunity, and disproportionate housing needs, including displacement. The analysis should not be limited to the jurisdiction itself, but should include the surrounding region and an understanding of the role the jurisdiction plays in current and historical trends of segregation at a regional level. Guidance memo, page 48. The guidance memo, page 32, further elaborates that analysis of racially or ethnically constituted areas of poverty
Thank you,
necessarily.
Pew. Thank you, Pew. So this will be part of our written communications.
Correct.
Okay, and for members of the public, my apologies that there was such a brief amount of time for public discussion, public comment, and I think that's, as we move on to future agenda items, that we take that into consideration, that we definitely need to have more time for public comment. And I do see Planning Commission Chair Scharf, your hand is raised.
Yeah, I agree. I was disappointed in the 1 minute. And I would respectfully suggest that our consultants try to be more succinct in their presentations so we have a lot more time for public comment. I never liked cutting it down from 3 minutes. I understand why it was necessary today, but hopefully in future meetings, we can allow the public to speak for 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. And I believe we have completed item 1. We have closed public comment. Andy, did you have any further statements about it?
Yes, as I mentioned, these 3 questions were in the memo, and I just want to check in while we have Chris Jensen with us, that in the future, we could maybe also include questions on our website and point people to that so that they can add to the conversation ahead of time, and that could maybe even be part of the written documentation that we bring forward to the next meeting. Mr. Jensen, is that something that's possible?
Yeah, no, of course, there's no issues with providing additional information on the website. The members of the committee should, obviously avoid discussing amongst themselves outside of the meeting, but there's certainly no issue with putting information on the website for both the committee members and the public to see.
Thank you, Chris. And maybe in light of the minimal time that the public was able to comment today, we can also make clear a portal on our website specifically for preparation for the next meeting. So so that we could include those comments going forward, and include it as an attachment to the next memo, along with the committee members' comments that may follow on between now and then.
And I want to encourage people, when you do it that way, there's a little less urgency. This is a limited kind of form in order to bring your concerns forward, and because they're just spoken and with very little response, sometimes it's frustrating. So if you do it in advance, you might have less frustration.
Okay, thank you. And with that, item 1 is complete. The next item is staff and committee reports. Do we have any staff and committee reports at this time? Okay, not okay. Andy, your hand is raised. Do you have a report? Okay, thank you. Planning Commission Chair, do you have a report? No.
No, sorry, my hand was raised.
Okay. And next we move on to future agenda setting. And here I think we need to decide when our next meeting is. Personally, I'd like it to be next Wednesday, and discuss what, well, we can come up with what that agenda would include. It is right now 12:53. Or do members of the committee want to discuss the next meeting timeline, and then what items you would like to have on that agenda at this time? So Vice Mayor, do you have a comment on having the next meeting next Wednesday at 11? Okay, I'm not hearing.
I can do next Wednesday. Thursday is okay. I have another monthly meeting that's first of every Wednesday. Okay. I mean, the first Wednesday of each month.
Okay.
So, I can do Thursday.
Next Thursday at 11. Okay. Is that something that each member of the committee, and that we will have Andy and members of the EMC consultant team present for? if it were next Wednesday at, next Thursday at 11, so that we're looking at, okay, so that's Thursday, April 7th, is that correct? At 11?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, that okay.
Okay, I'm
So,
not hearing any protests from the committee.
A question, is there a way for the public to email the committee? So that they can make their comment before the meeting, even if they couldn't speak during the meeting.
If I may, to the chair.
Yeah.
Vice Mayor Chow, our idea right now is that we would make a portal available on our website, and we would make it very front and center so that those comments could be incorporated as an attachment within the packet for the next meeting.
Okay, great. And then this is the second person from Housing Choices mentioned this email they sent about their recommendation on the housing policy. So how can we get this kind of comment sent to the city? Would they be posted somewhere?
You could share that with Luke, and Luke will make sure that we incorporate it in with our attachments.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. I was just going to suggest the same thing. If there's a comment like that, feel free to forward it to me.
I didn't get it. They said they sent it to the city. That's the thing. They sent it to someone at the city.
Okay.
And I said I never got it.
Thank you. Let's work on that offline since we are down to 4 minutes.
If I may suggest, Chair Moore, just really quick, if any emails that are pertaining to the housing element, please send them to planning@cupertino.org, and staff will make sure that it gets sent to the committee members and or included in the packet. So planning@cupertino.org, that would be the email to send it to.
Okay, thank you, Pew. And also with regards to the agenda for next week, I would like the subject to essentially be the same as our item 1, but some of the attachment items might alter at that point, and have some reporting back for regarding what we talked about today, bringing those items up. And there was some of the questions, I think we'll probably have some thoughts after this meeting and be forwarding our ideas on. And I see Housing Commission Chair Parris, your hand's raised.
Yes, just my request was if there's any way that we could have the audit assessment of the demographics for the next meeting, so that we can actually start attacking or, moving on that. And yes, I agree, we should have the comments from the public so that maybe we can address them for the next meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we are asking to have a longer public comment period mapped out in that schedule and have some more brief presentations. Okay, let's see. Planning Commission Chair Scharf, your hand was raised. Did you?
I just wonder, is there going to be a separate agenda setting meeting that the temporary chair and the permanent chair have before the meetings and that we can send our requests to? Or how does that work?
I think that's a question for our city attorney.
I mean, could we have, we have agenda setting for city council, agenda setting for planning commission. Maybe we need to separate agenda setting so we have more time for other things in this meeting.
Okay, well, it's my understanding that for right now, our future agenda setting is happening for this item. So if you have something that you want on next week's agenda, aside from the election,
if we can get a report from or have a school board member or get a report from the districts on enrollment trends.
Okay, thank you. And did our city attorney want to comment on this item?
I'd like to note that that kind of request for information or discussion of a request to include future items on the agenda does not necessarily need to be separately agendized under the Brown Act.
Okay, so there could be items that are going to show up on the agenda. I'm going to assume that I'm the interim chair and that it could be done through me at this point.
So I'll just defer to Luke and our city manager as to how they want to handle that. But I think that from my perspective, that would be fine as long as nobody on the committee objects.
Okay, thank you. And for now, we don't get too bogged down on that particular topic. Housing Commission Chair Parris, your hand's raised. No. Okay. Vice Mayor.
Yeah. So next time, can we already start planning the outreach meetings? I think we will propose some ideas, and if there could be a proposed plan on the date. I know we are on a tight timeline, so we should start planning the outreach meetings where, when, on location, format. That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. And Andy, did you have any closing comments before I adjourn the meeting until next Thursday at 11?
We highly value everybody's participation, and we look forward to everyone sharing their comments, questions, ideas, so that we can bring that forward in a much more robust discussion at the next meeting.
Wonderful. Okay, and thank you for everyone from the public who joined us today, EMC and the committee. Thank you all. And with that, our meeting is adjourned. See you all next week.